I'm gonna give you the top 6 accessory movements for Olympic weightlifting, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you want to be a better athlete, you want to run faster, you want to be more explosive, you want to get stronger, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So the sport of Olympic weightlifting is an extremely demanding sport. There's multiple different lifts that can really beat up the body. There's multiple different joints inside the body that can really get damaged. They can get inflamed. They can cause a ton of pain. And we've got Olympic weightlifters that might get banged up for various reasons, depending upon various mobility issues, because they're not being trained properly. And a lot of that has to do with how accessories are periodized inside of their programming. And so we've got to think right away, what are accessories, right? We've got to define what exactly accessories are. And right off the bat, we got to think about, number one, there's going to be competitive lifts. So the competitive lifts are going to be the snatch and the clean and jerk. That's pretty simple. Number two, we got to think about variations. Variations are going to be anything that's going to emulate or be very similar to the competitive lifts. So think about a power snatch, a power clean, a power jerk if you're a split jerker, a low hang clean, a low hang snatch, anything along these lines. Those are going to be under the label of variations. Then we're going to start to dig deeper into what we're going to refer to as the strength exercises. So we can start to think about back squat, front squat, snatch pull, clean pull. Pretty simple. We're starting to see now how all these things factor in, and those are going to be our strength specific exercises. And then that brings us into basic accessories. So we can start to think about accessories as a bodybuilding sort of movements, anything along the lines of pull-ups, dips, glute ham, anything that's going to help us strengthen certain areas that tend to get banged up in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. And first of all, we've got to start to think, now that we've defined those accessories, what joints are going to get beat up when we're talking about Olympic weightlifting. So right off the bat, if you're doing a snatch, you're doing a jerk, we know our elbows can tend to get a little bit inflamed. We know our shoulders can start to deal with a lot of stress. Along with that, we're going to be doing a lot of pulling movements. So our lower back might start to get banged up. Our knees might start to get banged up from catching those cleans, from doing a lot of back squats. And then on top of that, maybe our ankles, if our mobility is really poor in our ankles, our Achilles might start to get sore. And so we've got to take a step back, and we can sit there very easily and go, shoulders, elbows, lower back, knees. These are going to be the predominant areas that we've got to really start to focus our accessory work on to make sure that our structural balance is in check and our body can adapt to all the stress that we want to put on it to make ourselves become champion Olympic weightlifters. So that first key accessory coming in at number 6, we're going to focus on pull-ups. And why do I like to have my weightlifters hit pull-ups all the time? If we can think about it, there's a skill known as a co-contraction. And if our lifters can co-contract and create a very stable shoulder girdle, a lot of that is going to have to do with how well our lats are firing. So if we have weightlifters who have very strong lats, that's gonna help them keep the bar tighter. It's gonna help them be more stable overhead. And a lot of that comes back to being able to bust out a ton of pull-ups. And all of my weightlifters hit pull-ups on a regular basis. Even my lifters that tend to be in the heavier weight classes, 102, 109, they're still going to be doing upwards of 10 to 12 reps in the pull-ups. And this is very important for maintaining a shoulder girdle that is healthy, that can support the stress that the shoulders are going to take. So I recommend doing pull-ups 1 to 2 times a week for anywhere from 5 to 12 reps. Coming in at that number 5 spot, we're going to piggyback off of the pull-ups, and this is going to be another accessory movement that's going to help us stabilize that shoulder. It's going to help us prevent any serious injuries in the shoulder, be it from the snatch or the jerk, and that is going to be dumbbell external rotations. And this is an accessory that you can do when you're standing. This is something you could do against a wall. This is something I also like to do even when you're sitting down. You can be seated, you can have that knee elevated so it's almost directly in line with your shoulder, and you can do that full external rotation. Now, a couple key concepts. I recommend when you're doing that external rotation that you're doing anywhere from a 4 to 7 second eccentric. That's gonna really help prevent any buildup or inflammation in that shoulder, and it's going to strengthen it tremendously. I recommend doing anywhere from 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 10 reps. And I believe even doing dumbbell external rotations as a warm-up can go a very long way in preventing shoulder injuries. Coming in at that number 4 spot, we're gonna start to target the lower body. We're gonna start to target the knees, and that's gonna bring us to those Spanish squats. So a lot of long-legged lifters tend to get a little bit more banged up in their knees than the short-legged lifters. And what ends up happening is they tend to get smashed on the catch of a clean. Maybe they collapse in the bottom of a squat, and you can see that chest sort of dive forward, and then their knees dive forward and their heels start to pop. So we can see a whole bunch of stress driving right into that knee joint. And so what I've learned over the years is that I believe the Spanish squats, one, they can be a really good accessory, but two, they can be very, very good for improving blood flow before the workout. So I recommend doing Spanish squats at a very light load. You can hold a goblet, you can hold a dumbbell in the goblet position. Maybe you're gonna hold 40 pounds. You have decent tension with a band attached to an immovable object, and you wanna put that band around the back part of your knees so that when you get to the top of the squat, you're pressing your knees back into the band, and that's when you're gonna start to feel that really nice quad pump. Now remember, long-legged lifters tend to have pretty weak quads, and what happens then is now their quads start to get a little bit more activated. If they're a long-legged lifter, they start to use them a little bit more while they're training in the sport of Olympic weightlifting, and that's gonna help decrease that stress on the knee. So I recommend either doing it for 1 to 2 sets at a nice easy pace as a warm-up, or do it 2 to 3 times a week for 3 to 4 sets of 12 to 17 reps to really get the quad pump rolling and to get some good blood flow into the knee to make sure that your knee stays healthy. Coming in at that number 3 spot, I've got a secret for you. I've got a big one. I've got a huge accessory that no one ever uses. It is referred to as the Miracle Grow. And so why do we like to use this? First of all, this is an accessory. This is a lift that my brother and I created when we were training at the original garage at my parents' gym back in the late 1990s, and we had no equipment, we had no machines, and we wanted to get huge triceps. So we started to play around with a dumbbell pullover. And we started to play around with this over and over again. And then all of a sudden we started to add in some elbow flexion. And that's where we started to differentiate the Miracle Grow from the dumbbell pullover. It's not just a lat movement, it's actually a tricep movement with lats being triggered, with your abs being triggered. And why do I like this? I like this because it protects the elbows. It trains your elbow extensors to fire in conjunction with your lats, in conjunction with your abs. You get tremendously stretched through the upper body, through the trunk, and that tricep gets very, very lengthened, as does the lat. And as you pull that dumbbell super, super deep and then start to bring it back over your face, that's gonna hammer your triceps, and all of a sudden the intermuscular coordination is going to be off the charts. And that is a great way to improve your lockout in the snatch catch. It's a great way to improve your lockout in the jerk, and it's a great way to protect that elbow joint so that the triceps are strong enough to handle the beating that your elbows tend to take from a lot of snatches, from a lot of jerks, from push presses, whatever it might be. I recommend doing Miracle Grows only once a week because they tend to make you incredibly sore. I highly recommend watching our Garage Strength Miracle Grow video that we filmed years and years ago, because you will learn quickly that this exercise specifically can make you sore for 2 to 3 days. It's gonna hit every single head of the tricep, and I recommend doing Miracle Grows for anywhere from 4 to 5 sets of 7 to 12 reps. Coming in at that number 2 spot, now we're gonna start to target the trunk. We're gonna start to target the gut. We're gonna start to target the abs, and that's where ironclad abs starts to come into play. And the key part behind this is that we've really gotta think about having a little bit of lumbar flexion. And that means pushing our belly button into the bench when we're executing that ironclad ab. We wanna really push that belly button as our legs are raised up to the ceiling, and as our legs go forward and then down below the bench, we wanna continue to hold lumbar flexion. We wanna push that belly button down, 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 and that's where you're gonna start to feel shaking in your abs. That's where you're gonna start to feel that really take a toll. But what ends up happening is that lifters start to gain more control over their abs. And now this is gonna transfer over really, really well when they're front squatting, when they're back squatting, when they're pulling off the floor, when they're dipping in the jerk. They're gonna start to fill that belt, fill it up with air from their belly button, and that's gonna provide a whole ton of support that's gonna provide them with a very good foundation to execute those lifts as optimally as possible. So make sure when you're doing the ironclad abs that you're doing them properly. You're keeping that lower back flat on the bench, and you're really targeting those abs tremendously well. I would recommend using a 7.5 to 15 pound dumbbell at the max, because these are gonna light up your abs and they're gonna help you learn how to coordinate your entire trunk properly. Before we head into that number 1 exercise, it's important to recognize that all of these accessories we use in our training program at Garage Strength. We dive deep into this topic of accessories, of training in general, and how to periodize these inside of our parabolic periodization program. Our book that we put out in conjunction with an entire course around periodization and how we utilize these movements every single day in training, from a micro perspective all the way to that big picture macro perspective. You can click on the link down below. You can pick up your copy today. Coming in at that number 1 spot, I believe this is the best accessory movement to utilize for all Olympic weightlifters. And I also believe this is an incredible exercise to pair with the ironclad abs. And that accessory is the reverse hyper. And I think it's really, really important that we utilize the reverse hyper properly. We've got to get on the pad and make sure that we're filling our stomach up with air. We're trying to feel that lumbar flexion from the ironclad abs come into play now when we're doing the reverse hyper. And we want to have a decent amount of control. We don't want a ton of swinging. We don't want full stop either on the eccentric. There's going to be swinging that goes into the reverse hyper execution, but it's got to be mildly controlled. I even recommend supersetting ironclad abs with reverse hyper, because your trunk is going to start to fire together properly, and that is going to go a long way, because you're going to start to recognize as a weightlifter how to coordinate your lower back, your posterior chain along with your abs. And a lot of Olympic weightlifters struggle with this. And the sooner you can figure out how to coordinate your abs with your posterior chain, now that's going to lead to better pulls, to better squats, to better execution of the competitive lifts. And that's the biggest thing we've got to recognize with all of these accessories. These accessories are meant to make you a better weightlifter. They're not meant to make you a better bodybuilder. They're not meant to make you a better powerlifter. These are accessories that are meant to optimize your Olympic weightlifting training. So going back to it, make sure that your gut is filled with air, that when you get to the top, you get that chest to rise up a little bit, and you're squeezing through the abs, you're squeezing through the lower back, and you're squeezing through your glutes and your hamstrings. I like to do the reverse hyper for 4 sets of 17 to 20 reps. You're gonna get a huge pump in your lower back, and it's also going to trigger your abs, but that's gonna pay off long term. I even like to have our athletes do the reverse hyper up to 2 to 3 times a week. And some athletes that tend to be a little bit more prone to back issues will even utilize a reverse hyper before training because it does such a good job of stimulating that lower back growth. So if you want more information about Olympic weightlifting training, you can head over to garagestrength.com and you can pick up our parabolic periodization textbook and course. If you want more videos about Olympic weightlifting, you can click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.